You're listening to English with Monty, the podcast about the English language. Today is 8-Minute English, talking about modal verbs using the word have. Hello there and welcome to 8-Minute English. And I've got Amy on the show. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing really well. I thought we'd do a bit of grammar today, so we're going to do something on modal verbs. How do you feel about modal verbs? So it's modal verbs using have. What's your experience with students, and do you think this is quite a tricky subject for some students?
Absolutely. I would say the majority of my students at some point have struggled with modal verbs, much more than learning main verbs that don't require a modal. And that's not just beginners or lower levels, but even the slightly higher levels as well can still make common mistakes with these modal verbs, including have.
That's true, isn't it? I think there's some confusion sometimes with modal verbs in general, isn't it? I suppose when we talk about modals, we're here, I guess, with have, we're talking about will, might, and would. The form is obviously using that particular modal verb. And then you've got have, and then the past participle.
Even past participle, be careful, guys, because it's quite easy for students to make a mistake there and then maybe use past simple. It needs to be the third form of the verb if it's irregular.
That's a good point there, isn't it? I think sometimes that can trip people up, definitely. Yeah. As you say, it's always using the third form. Obviously, if that's regular verb, then it stays the same, the past simple and the third form. I guess it's the irregular ones that you've got to watch out for. Most of the time they're changing, aren't they? If we use will, first of all, they will have arrived by now. If we're talking about this, we're referring back from the present in this case. It's like you're saying, okay, I'm not here in that moment, but in my reckoning, it's the right kind of time. So for me, they will have arrived by now. That's a little bit confusing, I guess, isn't it?
It can be confusing because I think students get confused between the present and future.
It really does seem like the future, doesn't it?
It does.
But this is referring to the idea that a present thing has happened.
Exactly.
Do you have any other examples that might help out?
Yeah, so something like it's half-term week. My students will have taken holiday by now. It's half-term week is this week for a lot of countries. A lot of my parents' kids are off school. And again, that action of they will have taken holiday by now, it has started, is now, if that makes sense.
Of course, because I guess if we're using by now, that's when it works, isn't it?
Yeah, that time expression by really helps, I think.
Of course. As well, we've got to think about the idea that it can still refer to the future, can't it? In the sense that we can say by the end of the decade, scientists will have discovered a cure for flu, for example.
Yeah, because then it's future perfect, isn't it?
It is future perfect in that case, isn't it?
So another one could be by next year, I will have taught for 10 years. Oh my God.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I will have taught. So exactly, that means this time next year, what's that, October 2024, the action will continue and I will have taught that amount of time by that point.
Great. Wow. 10 years. That's a milestone.
Master English.
Yes, indeed. So cool. That's a great example, though. Hopefully that will help the listeners understand a bit better or remember a bit better, because it's referring to how long you're going to be teaching for. So quite an interesting one. That's it, more or less, with will have, isn't it?
Exactly. I think that's clear. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully that's clear. With might can refer back to a point of time in the past.
I think we could add there to explain that clearer. So kind of speculating on the past.
Okay.
If you're aware of speculation, that word, or deduction in the past, that might help them a bit more. This obviously lowers the possibility of what has happened in the past. So we're not sure. It's like a maybe, but of the past.
I think that's the perfect way of describing it, really. In that case, you're not quite sure as what happened. For example, you arrive back home and the car's not on the drive and you say, oh, my mum must have taken the car or must have gone to the gym. Or sorry, shouldn't be using have. I'm using must have. Might have gone to the gym.
So, I mean, it still exists, must have.
It does exist, that's true. But must have would be deduction as well, right? So, I
It
mean,
would be. You'd just be nearly 100% sure.
exactly. Whereas might have is we're not sure, are we? It's like, oh, this could have happened. This
Exactly.
might not have happened.
Or another one, like my student was late this morning. She might have had a good excuse. Might have had a good excuse.
She
Maybe.
didn't have a good excuse. We could change this one to she should have had a good excuse, maybe.
Yeah, we could. We could.
Because she didn't. So, I don't know. Anyways, let's not go there.
But
Yes.
as you can see, we're including more should have and must have. There's a lot of different ways to use have as a modal verb.
This is true, isn't it? To begin with, we talked about the idea of will, might, or would.
There are so many more.
There are so many more. That's very true. You do have should have, must have, might have, could have.
So basically many more than the ones listed here.
I suppose with these particular ones, it's more a case of just having the reference point, isn't it? You're referring back to certain elements, but I guess that's true of all of them, isn't it, really?
Absolutely, referring to a specific moment.
Because I guess with might as well, you can refer back from a point in time that's in the future. For example, we won't eat until they arrive. They might not have had supper or dinner. This one is just speculating that by the time they arrive, by that moment in the future, they might not have eaten.
Exactly.
I think that's more or less it. Was there anything else that you wanted to add at all?
No, I think just the good thing here is it is just have. So if you're wondering whether that changes to, wait 1 second, it's only have. So don't worry about subject. Is there has as a possibility? No, because it comes after the modal verb will, might, etc. The nice thing here is it can only be have.
That's true, isn't it? Because the modal takes the third person, doesn't it? If there is a third person. So therefore, yes, it's always have, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose we didn't really say would have, did we? We didn't use that, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, we could finish with would have. That's quite a good one. So that makes me think of third conditional, reflecting on the past and wishing for a different past. But yeah, something like in a third conditional, right? If I had known the party started at 8, I would have been earlier. I wasn't early and I didn't know the party started at 8.
I mean, I think, to be honest, that's probably the most common way of using would have, isn't it?
Yeah, even if you removed the conditional half, you could have just used the I would have.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's probably, let me see another example here. It was 5:30. Dad would have finished work. I phoned at 6 o'clock. I knew he would have got home by then. It was 5:30. Dad would have finished work. And so if you're referring to a time expression there, then you don't necessarily have to use the conditional form, do you?
Exactly. There's other ways of explaining it without the third conditional.
Indeed. Okay, great. Thanks for joining me, Amy.
Thank you too.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for listening, listeners. And you've been listening to 8 Minute English.